Hey guys, I think it says we're live. Yeah, it looks like it. Okay, there it goes. Okay. Hey guys, Author Chat is officially back for 2016, and we've got Holly, and I keep forgetting how to pronounce your last name.
It's Schindler, just like the old movie, Schindler's List.
Schindler. All right. And this time we are back with her book, Spark, which was amazing. You guys, of course, can go to crossroadreviews.com and check out the giveaway and my review for it as well. And these were slightly damaged in shipping. So each book will also come with your choice of an ebook via Holly of your, what titles?
Well, either any of the three of my full-length indie ebooks. I do Miles Left Jet, which is a road trip book, and it's good for fans of the Exotic Marigold Hotel. I do Fifth Avenue Fidos, which is sort of a blend of genres. It's a little bit new adult, a little bit rom-com, kind of a satirical look on modern relationships, and it does include dogs. So if you're a dog person, it's good for you. Or I would do Play It Again, which is the sequel to my young adult romance, Playing Hurt. So either any one of those three, a bonus ebook, since those two had kind of a rough ride by the USPS.
Poor books.
Yeah, I know.
Poor books. I got a small box of books last week with a note stating, "Oh, we're sorry, these were lost in the mail. Here, you can have
the box.
Found them, and you can have them back." And like, well, that's great. So, word of the wise: if publishers are watching this, or other authors, if you're going to ship anything, tape it like I tape stuff. Like, make it so they have to actually like cut into it to open it. Because that way you know that no matter what happens, it could get trampled, it could get ran over. Nothing is falling out of my boxes, ever. All right, so, Holly, let's start in on these wonderful, wonderful questions that I have somewhere buried on my phone here. All right, so why did you decide to write a book about the theater?
Oh gosh, I grew up, I've grown up, I'm a lifelong Springfieldian, so I've grown up in kind of that southwest corner of the state, and we've got several old theaters around here. Even in my hometown here in Springfield, we've got the Galloy Theater, which underwent a renovation not too long ago. It's a kind of I believe it's a 40s era theater. Just like the Avery and Spark, and it's got kind of a cool history. Elvis watched a movie in there before he performed in the 50s in Springfield. We had some premieres of some Ron Reagan movies, I believe, in the 50s over there. We have the Electric Theater, which is now called the Fox. It's still, I believe, still showing movies. It used to show movies, and it had a stage inside of it for, like the Avery does in Spark. For theatrical productions, and there was an old movie theater in Aurora, Missouri, which isn't too far from Springfield. It was called the Princess. It's no longer in existence, but it was a 40s theater. It had sconces on the walls, the original sconces, the original seats, and I loved to go see movies at the Princess. In fact, when I got my master's degree, that's where I wanted to go to celebrate. We went to Aurora, we ate lunch at Bootleggers, which was across the street at the time, and then we saw a movie at the Princess. So I've always loved the old theaters. I've always kind of been drawn to the actual buildings in and of themselves as much as, watching the plays and the movies that went on inside. And I'm sure that had a huge impact on the way I describe the Avery. I describe it as a living thing to a great extent. Throughout, and I think just the love of the actual setting really played into being drawn to writing about an old theater like that. Yeah.
All right, so why did you decide to add the magical aspect of the cross-starred lovers?
Oh, the cross-starred lovers. Well, you can't do anything about the theater without somehow referencing Shakespeare, even in an indirect way, right? And because he sort of seems like, the greatest kind of modern influence as far as theatrical work goes. And I love the idea of being able, I'm a big reviser. A lot of my work has been, my novels have been rewritten, countless times. And I love the idea of being able to actually rewrite history, or to draw cross levers, you know, kind of taking that, you know, you can completely turn a story inside out when you're revising it, when you're doing global edits. And I love the idea of being able to take that into real life, you know, and revising something that actually happened. So, you know, it was a little bit liking the idea of revising history, and it was a little bit, you know, a nod, of course, to Shakespeare. Because you can't, like I said, I don't think you can do anything theater related without somehow referencing Shakespeare. Yeah.
Right. The next question is, most stories are told via the point of view of those involved in the physical romance. What was it like writing this story via somebody that's technically an outsider?
Yeah, so we've got Quinn, who is our protagonist, right, in Spark, and she is watching a love story unfold between her best friend Cass and Dylan, who's also their classmate. And when I started Spark, I actually I started with Cass and Dylan to begin with. Quinn wasn't part of it. And I liked the idea, one of the original ideas, kind of that, you know, it's kind of an awful play on words here, but that spark of inspiration to begin with, was I wanted to write a book about, I was kind of playing with the idea of these two flawed people who were able to see themselves without their flaws. You know, it's a you know, the old idea of love being blind, and I also like the idea of, you know, we all have flaws, or we all think we have flaws. We all have things we nitpick about ourselves. We don't like, you know, certain features we have physically. We don't like certain aspects of ourselves. We wish we weren't as shy as we were. We wish we were, you know, we had, you know, a better ability to talk to, you know, people we want to meet. You know, we have all these kind of flaws that we don't like about ourselves. And the Cass and Dylan have two pretty obvious outward flaws. Cass has a birthmark, and Dylan has a stutter. But I thought, you know, what would happen to you if you could step away from those flaws, the things you don't really like about yourself? Would you become a different person? Would you become more outgoing? Would you have, you know, would you have better charisma? Would you be braver? Would you take things on that you wouldn't take on, you know, if you were not able to step away from those flaws? That's where it all started. And, you know, as I got into it, it just didn't feel right. You know, I've written a romance that alternated points of view. Playing Hurt does that, and also Played Again, the sequel. They both do that, where I take on, I alternate chapters between the female and the male point of view, telling their love story. But it really wasn't working here. And I knew I needed that sort of distant voice that was watching from afar, but I also didn't want it to be my voice, right? I didn't want it to be this authorial looking down on this scene and describing it as it happened. I wanted somebody involved who also, you know, who was invested in these people, who loved these people, and was writing from, you know, a viewpoint of someone who cared about, you know, the outcome of that romance as it unfolded. And it was really fun to do, because, you know, that I had never done that before. And it was a really fun thing to do. Plus, you know, I think the writer who gets to write through a character, you know, you're kind of putting yourself in it in a way you wouldn't in characters otherwise. You know, the glasses wearing writer, Quinn, right? I got to write myself into it in maybe a stronger way than I would have without her. But I think she pulls it together in a completely different way than just writing it from Cass and Dylan's point of view.
I actually really liked it that it wasn't from, you know, an insider point of view, that it was from an outside point of view, because you get to see more.
Yeah.
You don't know exactly what, you know, those two specific people are thinking, of course, but you didn't really need it. And I think it worked really well.
Thank you. Yeah.
I really loved it. All right. Quinn was such a great character. What was it like to write her, and what was her hardest scene and her easiest scene?
Oh, the one I rewrote more than any was the one where she's watching the Avery come back to life for the first time. I must have written that about 50 times. You know, going back and trying to write, I think that's my biggest, you know, the thing that I work on the most is something that is physically happening. Describing something as it's physically happening is the hardest part of the whole thing for me. I'm a big metaphorical writer. You know, some of my earlier works, especially A Blue So Dark, and even my MG, The Junction of Sunshine and Licky, they have a lot of simile and metaphor writing throughout, and I love to write description. I think that is a huge, I mean, that's just sort of like the most delicious part for me, right? Is writing these paragraphs of description, and to get into writing actually, you know, a physical scene to describe something as it is happening is the biggest challenge for me. And to not go too far metaphorically and describing and making it real, and keeping the pace of it right, moving it along so that it doesn't get bogged down, and is interesting and is followable. I mean, that's the hardest part for me. Some of the most, for me, always the most fun is the beginning of a book. So always, I love the setup of a book, both as a writer and a reader. So I love getting in there, and those first few chapters are always sort of the most enjoyable for me, really setting the stage, introducing the characters, describing the world that those characters are living in. That's the most exciting part for me. But that theater, that theater coming back to life, I reworked that. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how many times I went back and rewrote that scene, that specific scene.
It was perfect. It was really All right. How does the backstory of Nick and Emma shape the events of Spark?
Yeah, Nick and Emma, so they're our star-crossed lovers, really, right? They're from 1947. They're teenagers in 1947, and they have a very brief, kind of sweet love affair, and it all ends tragically on the stage when they have an accident and they both pass away on the stage. And once that happens, the Avery closes, and the town kind of shrivels around it. So that tragedy has kind of led to a deterioration through the whole town. But Nick and Emma, you know, the thing about what I think is sort of interesting is I think a lot of times the kind of like the teenage experience is sort of universal. And the first time I really sort of realized it, I was teaching music lessons out of the house when I was writing my earliest manuscripts, and my earliest manuscripts were all adult. But when I started teaching piano and guitar lessons, I started interacting with, you know, some younger kids. I was interacting with, you know, elementary school kids, but I also had a few who were high school age, and they weren't that much physically younger than me at that point. I mean, I was like mid-20s and they were 15, so maybe 10 years younger, but we'd had sort of a technological revolution. And I really thought these kids were going to be so different than the kids I went to school with, and they weren't. They was all the same. You know, they went through the same struggles. They had, I mean, they seemed so familiar to me. I was like, these are, you know, kids I could have gone to school with, you know, when I was in high school. And I think so much of it is universal. And I think, you know, a lot of what I was doing was showing a mirror image of, you know, Cass and Dylan and Nick and Emma, showing that their relationships and what they went through were so similar. You know, we had two people in modern times who feel like they're flawed, and we had two people in 1947 who also feel like they're flawed, you know, and are finding their way in the world and are finding each other in addition. So I just think so much of, you know, there are so many struggles in life that are just universal. There's so many things that you feel like you're the only person in the world who's going through something. And that's the cool thing about literature. You open a book sometimes and you can hear your thoughts being spit back at you, you know, by a narrator. And that's a really powerful experience. Yeah.
The next question is, did you ever perform in the play Anything Goes? And yes or no, but why did you choose it?
No, I'm not a big performer. Love my music, but I've never been a big performer. Didn't do anything with theater department or the drama department in high school or college, either one. I chose it because for a lot of reasons. It's a play. It was the right age for there to be a kind of small town production of it, 1947. You know, it would be feasible that somebody could be doing it in a small town in 1947. I think the opening song, the song Anything Goes, remains sort of timeless. I think people can hear that in their heads still. So I think that's recognizable. It's not completely, you know, gone from pop culture reference. And also it allowed me to kind of play with, to do some wordplay. You know, that scene where they're actually performing the play, the class is actually performing the play toward the end of the book. You know, I'm actually able to use the phrase anything goes and engage in some wordplay about the class and what they feel like at that point. You know, anything goes. You know, they're stepping away from their opinions of themselves that they've always had, stepping out of themselves, and you know, taking on some new roles. They're taking on the role of a confident performer at the end, which is something none of them have ever been, right? They've sort of been, they've classified themselves as a bunch of senior nobodies. So there's, you know, all of that's, you know, out the window. Anything goes, and I'm stepping into a new role for myself. So it was, there were several reasons why I did. I chose that one, or why I gravitated toward that one. But it allowed me to play a little bit in that last scene.
What makes the setting of Spark so beautiful and mysterious?
Ooh, I think, you know, I think there's something about a building that has a lot of history to it. You know, that has seen generations come and go, that has seen its own rises and falls, its tragedies and its triumphs. I think there's, and I think it could be, I think that's true of a theater. I think it's true of a town. It can be true of a house. There's just something about, a setting that's got a lot of history to it. I think it makes it richer. It's sort of like an old instrument, right? When you play an old instrument that's got some age to it, the sound that comes out of it a lot of times is richer. And I think that's true of any setting. Yeah.
That is the last book related question that we have.
Okay.
So now we're going to go into more of the normal, you know, generic, everybody gets asked questions. Why did you decide to become a writer, and how many books so far have you published?
Okay. I've been writing since I was a little girl. I had a child-sized roll-top desk in my bedroom, and I know even when I was in the first grade, I was handwriting stories, illustrating them, tying them up with ribbon. So I've been writing since I was a little girl. As far as publications, I got a stack of them over here. My first YA, my first book ever, it was also a YA, it was The Blue So Dark. This one is about creativity and mental illness, kind of the mad genius, right? The possible link between the two. It's about a young girl who's caring for a schizophrenic mother, and they're both artists. So kind of exploring that whole idea of mental illness and creativity, and just kind of a cool side. This is the Russian edition of A Blue So Dark. It's also, I love this cover. It's my first kind of completely originally illustrated cover, if I can get it on there so you can kind of see it. It features everybody from the book, is what I think is so cool about it. We've got Aura, the main character. We've got her crush, Jeremy. This is Aura's mom, the artist, with her sketchbook. Aura's friend, Janny, and her son, Ethan. We've got the grandmother, Nell. I mean, it just was really, it seems so kind of like cool and thoughtful to me that all the elements of the book were on the cover. But that's the Russian edition. I followed that up in 2011. That was a 2010 publication. I followed that up in 2011 with Playing Hurt. It's a romance between a couple of athletes. And if you had asked me before I started publishing if you had told me I was gonna write a book about a couple of athletes, I would have laughed, because I'm about the least athletic person in the world. But it actually is a little bit more romance than it is actually about athletics. And then I followed that with my first MG, The Junction of Sunshine and Lucky. It's about a young girl who becomes a folk artist with her grandfather. And this one's been kind of fun to watch, you know, some of the developments with this over the last few years. It's hit some state lists, some state reading lists, and next year it's up for the Oklahoma Sequoia Award and the Mark Twain Award here in Missouri. And as a lifelong Missouri girl, I voted on the Mark Twain Awards when I was a young reader, so that's especially cool to me that this book is now on the list being voted on next year. I said
I love that cover.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, I really like that too. It's got some cool.
It looks so neat.
Yeah. It was really fun. I like all the little on the back. It's got kind of a wraparound. We've got some, they make sculptures out of recycled items, and we've got a few sculptures kind of throughout the cover. Then the same year that in 2014, the same year the Junction came out, I did Feral, which is a psychological thriller. We've got a young girl in there who survived a beating. And she's got PTSD, and I used the psychological thriller, the conventions of the thriller, to explore what it feels like to have PTSD. And then this year I released Spark, which we've been talking about. I'm also a hybrid author, and we already talked a bit about some of my full-length books that I've been releasing. I've been a hybrid since 2015, and also this year I'm releasing a short story a month. It's under the umbrella of the Forever Finley short story cycle, and they're all sort of kind of mystical stories that all take place in the small town of Finley. So I got magical realism on the brain, apparently, right? I had a magical realism release with Spark, and my short stories are trending that way as well. But it's been a lot of fun doing those short fictions and keeping them fresh, keeping them coming out once a month. I've had a ton of fun putting those out every month.
To check those out. How long did it take you to write and get Spark published?
Spark, when I signed with HarperCollins for Feral, it was a 2-book deal, and Spark was the second book in the deal. So after Feral released, it was probably the closest, I guess, to writing under contract I've ever done, because I did owe HarperCollins another YA. So it took several months to get it written, and then my editor and I bounced that one back and forth for global edits several times, probably over the course of about another year doing global edits. But the global edit, I almost feel like, looking back on it, took more time bouncing it back and forth for the global edits than actually writing the manuscript to begin with.
So how does that work? That you owe them 2 books, you've done one. Do they give you like a list of topics that you're supposed to write a story about? Or is it just do whatever you want, send it in, and maybe they'll love it, maybe they'll hate it, and you'll just like stand there with your fingers crossed?
I was really lucky with this one. I didn't have any guidance with it. They didn't say, after Feral, we definitely want another psychological thriller. They didn't say, could you go back and do contemporary realism, which is what, A Blue So Dark was. They didn't come at me with a list of restrictions. I submitted the next book, and my editor read it and liked the concept of it and bounced it back and forth with me. So, I didn't. I've heard, I know sometimes, like, contractually when you actually sign, they'll tell you, you sign a 2-book deal, and it can even be books in a series where they want book 2 or book 2 and 3 of the continuing story that aren't necessarily written yet. But this time I just did a 2-book deal, and the second book was pretty much up to me. So I was lucky in that way. I had freedom to write, to go where my heart was taking me and write the story I wanted to write, which was really cool. Yeah.
What is the next genre that you think you want to dive into?
Okay, well, let's see. I'm doing, one of the things I'm doing, I have written my next YA, which I'm going to send to HarperCollins in the next couple of months. I'm kind of in the ironing phase. I always call it the ironing phase. It's written, it's down. Now I need to get all those wrinkles out, all those little tiny problems out of the manuscript. And I'll have that out. And it is closer. It kind of rides the line again between magical realism and contemporary, but it actually is far more contemporary than Spark. But I'm also, the other thing that that the hybrid, doing independent work has allowed me to do is kind of branch out in different ways that I didn't think I ever would before, like doing the short stories. And one of the things I'm doing, I'm getting back into an old love, which is my artwork. A lot of my books, as I was running through there, they obviously had art themes, right? We've got a folk artist, we've got the mad genius in a blue so dark. We've got a lot of art themes. Even Spark, you know, the theater is an artistic pursuit. But I'm coming back to that. I'm coming back to the old love. You know, I was the kid in high school. I took more art classes than English classes. So this is an old love, and I'm getting back to it. I've got my digital drawing pad. I've got a bunch of software, and I'm getting into doing some original artwork and putting it with stories for younger readers. I did a short story, and I released last winter, Wordquake, and I am going to be illustrating that and getting it out in a print edition this summer. Also, I'm working on getting my novels out in print as well. I'm in the midst of putting Miles Left Jet up in a print version. And that is actually, I think actually laying out a book is actually kind of an artistic pursuit, you know, getting the visual, the way it looks visually on the page. You don't really get a chance to do that in an ebook because you can't account for what kind of devices people are going to read it on, right? It's so varied that you really have to keep it as basic as possible. But when you're getting a chance to lay a book out and actually think about, you know, how it's laid out on the page, the font, the margin width, you're really thinking about how it's laid out on the page. That it really is an artistic thing, you know, to lay out a book and get it to look the way you want it to. Get it to fit, to lay out the book in a way that actually fits, you know, the tone of the book, the style of the writing. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it that you don't really think about as a reader, because when it comes to you, it all fits, right? All those decisions have been made. The font's right, it's laid out right, it looks right, and it all just fits, and you don't really think about it. But when you're having to start from scratch and make those decisions about how big do I want the space between these lines, and is this font silly looking for the tone of this book? Then then you realize, you know, what goes into it, and it's really a cool thing. And it also changes your point of view, you know, as a writer. When you go open the new file, you're already thinking about what this book is going to look like when you're finished, you know, what the final product is going to be. And it changes, you know, you have a better idea in your head when you start out of where you're taking this book. So it's been a really cool process.
So then on the topic of covers, how many renditions of Spark did that book go through for covers, and did you have any input on the cover and the title at all?
It had several different titles. It had a lot of different titles. That was one where my editor kept saying this, you know, she had a feeling some of them she thought were trending a little young, sounded like MG titles, and we had to balance that one back quite a bit. Feral was the original title that it was acquired under, but Spark, we bounced that back a lot. The cover was not, we didn't bounce that as much. What they did, they sent me two options, and they did that with Feral as well. But with Feral, when they sent me the option, it was basically this cover with blue or turquoise. You know, which do you?
A lot of options.
Yeah, blue or turquoise. But Spark had two completely different covers. It was the Firefly cover, which we wound up with, and the other one was sort of a collage of different photos, and they were theater photos. Like the one on the top was a girl coming through a red curtain, and then the one on the bottom was some theater seating in like a deteriorating theater. And I thought the mood of this one, even though it doesn't have theater on the cover, the mood of this one was better. I also liked the vintage looking dress. I don't know if you can really see that, but the vintage looking dress. And one of the cool things about this cover, the photographer, you know, a lot of covers are stock photographs, and this one is as well. And I don't know how she found it, but the photographer found out that it was being used as a cover, and she got in contact with me. She's a young photographer in Italy trying to get started. So that was really cool to connect with her. She was really excited that her work had been chosen for a cover. But I got a chance to send her a copy of the book so she could hold it in her hand, hold her work in her hand. But that was the cool part of that cover was being able to talk to the person behind the cover photo. Yeah.
That is so cool. All right. So that is all the questions for today. I'm actually going to leave a question for the viewers, for people who watch the show, that you can comment below. What genre would you like, Holly, to dive in?
Hey, that'd be great.
No,
Yeah.
my answer. I want a 100% fantasy. Fantasy,
100%
100%
fantasy.
paranormal from you.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. I'm a big ghost story fan, so I could go for paranormal too.
That would be so cool.
That'd be awesome.
So let us know what you think in the comments.
That would be
All right?
great.
And I will leave the link to the giveaway as well. And I hope to see you back for your next YA.
Hey, great. Thanks for having me back. It's always so much fun to talk to you.
It's fun. I haven't done one of these in a while, so I was really excited to have you back on.
Yeah.
All right. So I will catch you guys later, and definitely check out Holly's site. You can check out her links on. You can actually comment with your links below if you would like. They're also on the post, and we'll see you guys on the next author chat.
Thanks, guys.